Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ola Jamo, and I am a senior specialist on Blue Shield's corporate citizenship team. First and foremost, we wish to thank the Commonwealth Club of California and our lovely host for today, Michelle Miao, for their interest and enthusiasm for hosting us and for having this very important discussion. We have worked with the Commonwealth Club and Michelle on a few panels before, but today's very special because it's our first in-person session. So I want to welcome everyone who's here with us today in person, and shout out to everyone who's with us virtually online. I'd like to start by painting a picture of how we got to where we are today. So picture this. It was the fall of 2019, so pre-pandemic times when we all maybe used to commute more, were in community more, and before we maybe didn't go to work in our pajamas as much. And this is when Blue Shield launched our signature youth mental health initiative called Blue Sky. Blue Sky came about due to the acknowledgement that mental illness is the #1 reason California students are hospitalized, and half of lifetime cases of mental illness begin at the age of 14. In order to lead with equity and to acknowledge this research, our Blue Sky initiative provides mental health resources and support to youth. We have been able to do this with 4 goals in mind. Our first goal is to improve access to high-quality mental health counseling, especially for youth of color. Our second goal is to increase access to providers who can provide a cultural responsive care by cultivating a pipeline of diverse youth to work in mental health careers. Our third goal is to develop awareness about youth mental health by training adults to recognize the needs of young people to then provide appropriate support, especially for youth of color. Our last and final goal is to grow advocacy programs that educate and empower youth to engage with resources that support their emotional well-being and that of their peers. Our Blue Sky program invests in best-in-class nonprofits and programs that works to provide mental health resources and empower youth early on with the tools to support their emotional well-being. We work with the California Department of Education and nonprofits statewide, such as Wellness Together, the National Alliance on Mental Illness California, Mental Health California, Health, Career Connection, and Directing Change, just to name a few. Our biggest investment has been with Wellness Together, who brings additional mental health specialists to schools, where they work in close collaboration with school staff in order to address student needs. In addition to individual counseling sessions with students, these specialists also provide crisis counseling and family sessions. Wellness Together has specifically been able to provide extra counselors in 20 middle and high schools in Alameda and San Diego counties. We are pleased to announce that since the launching of our program, we have fostered over 13,000 individual, family, crisis intervention, and group sessions with impacted young people. When considering all this very important work and different aspects, this is why tonight's panel discussion is so exciting. Michelle and this wonderful group of panelists who you'll meet will be covering a lot of ground on not just the issues of youth mental health awareness, but how we can work together to support each other, and how activism also plays a crucial role in helping young people to maintain their footing in an ever-changing society. Thank you all again for making the time to be with us today. And with that, I'll turn it to our moderator for today and our lovely host, Michelle Miao, who will introduce our wonderful panelists.
All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for all of you who are joining us here in person at the Commonwealth Club of California. And thank you to all of you who are joining us online. I'd like to introduce to you our amazing and esteemed speakers, our panelist speakers. And by the way, let's give them another round of applause, show them some love, because it's a big deal to be up here. We have David W. Bond. He is a licensed clinical social worker, board certified expert in traumatic stress, director of behavioral health of Blue Shield of California and Promise Health Plan. We have Howie, who is a youth leader from a Youth Power Fund fellow and from Yo Cali. And on Zoom with us, we have Sabrina Kinslow. It's right there on the screen. Sabrina, you look great. Vice President of Programming and Impact from Do Something. We also have, going out of order here a little bit, but next to Sabrina, we have Zitlali Ordonez, who's a community outreach worker from Chalk SF and land steward of Hummingbird Farm. And last but not least, Samuel Bass, who I actually had here first on my notes, lead youth organizer and community outreach specialist for Youth Alliance. So welcome, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us for this important panel. I'll start out by saying, me. My parents are refugees from Laos, trying to escape the communist war. A few years after they got here, I was pretty much only 2 years old. My dad died from a brain aneurysm, leaving my mom to raise 5 young kids, all 10 and under, on her own. We grew up, from what I remember, sharing a 1-bedroom with someone else who was a roommate. We grew up extremely poor. I came out about in my teenage years. My mom made me go to a Buddhist monastery every summer to try to pray it away, I guess. I didn't realize it from then on. But these are just a couple of the experiences I had as a young person. And when I hit my adult life, I'd always just thought that they're my unfortunate experiences. It was just my fate. And I just had to live with it, no matter how sad, depressed, or how difficult or how stressful it was for me. I never realized that there was support out there, that there is help, that there are tools to make me be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. So those are my lived experiences, and I think that, those lived experiences shape who we are, what we are. It impacts our mental health. I'll start with David first, and if you could share your lived experiences with us and how it affected your mental health.
Sure, and thanks, Michelle, for having this. Michelle Meow, that was my version of putting your names together.
I've been meowed at many times. It's okay.
I grew up in a very, very small town in the Midwest that had a lot of value on everyone being the same. And my father died when I was almost a year old, and he was a minister in the church that I was born into. So there's a lot of pressure about following in his footsteps, and that not only God, but also my father were observing every thought and feeling that I had, which caused a lot of anxiety as I was emergently gay, but trying so hard to suppress it. And this is in the 80s and 90s, where there were zero LGBTQ representation in the media at all. Like, this was pre-Ellen, pre-Will and Grace. The only representation of anything LGBTQ was the narrative of gay men living with and dying of AIDS. So having the other people around me perceive me to be gay, even though I was fighting it so hard, led to just me constant harassment and bullying. My memory is every day, all the way through high school. And at the time, it didn't matter if you were a gay boy or a trans girl or someone who was non-binary or genderqueer. All of us got lumped together and called the gay F word. So it was, we didn't even really have words for other communities within LGBTQ. It was really just gay or not at the time. So I think, though, that being able to sort of move out of that situation and finding a community of people that were more like me and understanding more about myself, and finally being able to identify the support where and when I could, had led me through to a career now in mental health, where my professional mission is to help people end pain and suffering, because no one should have to feel like that, and we should all be empowered to be our authentic selves.
Awesome. Thank you so much, David. Howie.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you so much for having us on the show. Again, my name is Howie. I am a child of immigrants. I am an immigrant myself. I was born in the Oromia region of Ethiopia and immigrated to the U.S. in the late 2000s. So we came here during the hit of the recession. So I think since we set foot, with immigrants, we operate from a scarcity mentality. So the topic of mental health wasn't something that was discussed in our household. So I didn't know what mental health was. I think I've definitely, and then watching the operation of I grew up with a single father. I lost my mother at a very early age, so I also didn't know how to process that as well. And so there wasn't time to process because it was movement, survival. And moving from a survival instinct really left me to not think about mental health. And it wasn't until through, I guess, media, and then really when I started organizing is when I realized about holistic care and wellness and what mental health really means. And so currently I think organizing is a way of how I do my healing, and it's how I've learned what healing looks like and what it can look like as well. And so that's why I'm here to talk about it.
Yeah, so thank you for y'all for sharing, and yeah, just having me here. It's a pleasure to be here speaking to everybody. For me, once again, my name is Sam, and I think an experience that really shaped how I see mental health and how I address it is Hurricane Katrina. So for me, I was born in Mississippi. I lived there till I was 6 years old. And then that was when Hurricane Katrina hit. And so I had to move. And for me, I was actually very fortunate in that I was able to evacuate, so I wasn't there when it happened, but it still caused a lot of instability and other difficulties in my life that I had to deal with. I had just started a new school just a few weeks before, so it was like I was just starting to make friends, and then after that, I moved, like I said, around the LA area, because that's where my grandparents were, so we moved in with them. And I basically did like a little less than half a year over there. And then after that, my dad found a job in Northern California. So then I moved to Morgan Hill, which is where I still live today. And so I finished first grade out in Morgan Hill. And then after that, there was like even issues in the district and stuff. So I had to switch schools again. So switching 4 schools within like the span of a year was really difficult, being 6 to 7 years old, that age during that period. It's like that's a very important time in socialization, learning how to make and build relationships, friendships, all that. So even today, I still feel the effects of that, of knowing like what healthy relationships are, respecting my own boundaries as well as other people's. And for me, obviously that's difficult, but at the same time, I try to look at the positive things, and I see how it's made me better to serve the youth that I work with, because now I relate to them better and how they went through the pandemic at such an early age. That's also a very important age of socialization for them, where they're learning relationships and all that. So to me, it's cool because I can even understand how they might invalidate their feelings. Like for me, for the longest, I said I got to evacuate. I didn't see dead bodies in the streets or anything like people who couldn't. And so just neglecting my own needs and my mental health issues related to that for the longest, really not good. And with these children that I deal with, a lot of people lost loved ones they care about, but not everyone. And so, for the youth that didn't lose people they care about, they might be invalidating their own needs like I once did. And just saying, like I didn't lose anybody. But the truth is, like, no, you still had to leave school because, it wasn't safe to keep having schools open. And, they had to go home where they might have been lonely. They might have dealt with domestic abuse in their homes, being very chaotic. So I'm able to just tell them, like, hey, your feelings are valid. I see you and I hear you and I'm here for you. And so, different kids will take it different ways, but, I feel like it has helped me in the work that I do. So, like I said, I just try to look at the positive of things.
Sitlali.
Hey y'all, my name is Sitlali. Thank you all who have shared. I'm born and raised in the city here on unceded Ohlone land, and that definitely has shaped a lot of my experiences. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and I'm also the oldest child in my household. And so growing up, like, I never saw my parents ask for help. They're always, like Howie mentioned, like always on survival mode. So growing up, I was the one in the household who spoke English and understood English, could read English, could write English. So whenever there was any paperwork, like, I was the one filling everything out. I I was always like the go-to to translate all the documents that came to my house. And seeing my parents not ask for help kind of like made me think like, oh, like you don't really ask for help, you just do everything on your own. And that definitely had a big impact on my mental health. Especially when I decided to go into like higher education, I didn't really have anyone that I could go and ask support, like, how do you do this? Because like my parents had never done anything here in the U.S. So going into higher education, not having any support, like not really being used to asking for help, definitely did a lot for me in like mental health experience. And then also, like when COVID hit, I was still in school, and that's when I really learned how to ask for help and ask for support. And like on the Zoom meetings and the chat, it was like less intimidating to like message my professor and be like, hey, I need help in this. And so I'm thankful for that experience.
Thank you so much for sharing. I know all about you got to read the mail. I still do that for my parents, or my mom, actually, 40 years later. Sabrina.
Hello, Sabrina here, representing DoSomething.org. And, I would say there was a turning point where I really started paying attention to my mental health and well-being. So I come from a family where education and performing at a high level is extremely important. Excellence is the standard. And I started dealing with grief at a young age. When my great-grandmother died, I was in about middle school. And she was the type of person who everyone felt like you were her favorite, because that's how she made each person feel in our family. She passed away, and then days later, people just continued on with their life, their jobs, their education, whatever they were doing. And it was, well, she's in a better place. We're still here on earth living, so we continue our lives. And that was constantly what it felt like, what I heard throughout life. No matter what happened, right? You still have to perform, you still have to do well, you still have to get the job done. And then I went to college, and in undergrad, I had an experience where I was assaulted while I was on campus. And I sought out mental health support at our campus student center. And unfortunately, it was a terrible experience where there was a lot of victim blaming. I was gaslit. I was told it wasn't as serious as, I was making it seem. I was being dramatic. So there was a time when I just felt like, well, if no one's going to listen, I'm not being seen. What I do is I just throw myself back into my academics. And it was that constant cycle of, this is how you get over things, and the suppressing of it. And then in 2014, I experienced my father's death. And 6 months after that, I saw my first therapist, because during that time, and again, never having dealt with grief truly, not speaking with anyone, no one talking to me about what it was, I actually would have times where grief would just overwhelm me. I would be driving and it would randomly overwhelm me, and I would stop on the side of the road and be crying in tears, just couldn't get it together. And I said, there's something wrong. I'm trying to push through. I'm going to work. I'm performing. I'm excelling. I'm doing 101 things. And it's not working. I'm sad. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I'm having these moments of just not being able to get it together and move on. And then at that time, that's when I was like, yeah, I think it's time to actually talk to someone about what's going on. I've been suppressing all the emotions of everything for most of my life. And that was a turning point when I said, this is not how it should be.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much, all. So the next question is just kind of, if you want to contribute to answer it, please jump in. But let's talk about societal impacts. I think a few things I've heard from each and every one of you. There's some stigma around mental health, obviously, right? Like, for example, I didn't go get help for the longest time because I didn't want people to think I'm crazy. And I really don't like that word. And when I did go get help, people thought that there was something wrong with me. What's wrong with you? So let's talk about some of the societal impacts, the stigma. I heard toxic masculinity, even right, anti-LGBTQ. Politics, there's a laundry list for some of us. Religion. David, you go first then.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's okay. So before, it's easier to talk about other people than it is to talk about yourself, right? So before I worked for Blue Shield of California, I was in charge. I was responsible for a national suicide prevention organization for LGBTQ young people, and we had 24-hour call centers. Anyway, the night of the Pulse shootings in 2016, where 49 LGBT people were shot, were killed, we had the highest call volume to our call centers than we had in the 18-year history of that organization. And it's not because suddenly that many people became suicidal and they had to have a suicide crisis line. It was because that many people had that emotional distress and didn't have someone else to talk to. And I remember I was listening to one person's call, and she said she was watching it on the news, and her father said yes, and those people deserved it. And it was that concept of like, something is so hurtful, and I'm so scared and ashamed, and I don't know where to go, and I feel all alone in the world. And even the people around me who are meant to love me are also rejecting of this thing about me that they may or may not know about. And then a few months later, the night of the presidential election in 2016, we had twice the call volume that we had the night of the Pulse massacre. And I wouldn't say that because of a presidential election, people become more suicidal. Again, it was that feeling of, I didn't know so many people don't share my values, which was the perception of what happened in that election. With any election, I think that happens. It's about, if you value this thing, you don't value me, and it's about, you can't possibly love me. So it was, it's that concept of like, how do we really talk to each other about whether we care about each other as human beings, we see each other, we witness our humanity, that society, based on whether it's politics or religion or even, TikTok or YouTube or, I'm just going to stop there. Like, there's so many of those impacts that just influence both risk and resilience depend on how we expose ourselves to those platforms.
1000%. Like to go next? Sam?
I could. So yeah, I would say a societal impact for me is, growing up as a male, you could definitely say I picked up on ideas of toxic masculinity. And, I really want to emphasize that this doesn't just hurt, non-males. It hurts everybody, really. And so for me, those ideas involved thinking that you can't be tough if you struggle with mental health. Now I know everyone struggles with it at some point, but when I was younger, I didn't. And so for the longest, like I said, I was neglecting my own needs. I was, pushing to the side my own feelings, trying to suppress them. And looking back on it, I remember when I was young, there were times I would just like snap and like take my anger out on people. And I would like right away, I would say, wait, that wasn't right. Like that person didn't deserve it. That they're not the source of all my anger. They just said a little thing that triggered me, And so that's kind of more of the short-term effects. And then long-term, it was like I pushed feelings to the side for so long that eventually I had like a series of panic attacks. And for people who know and who've had panic attacks, it's like, it feels like you're going to die, the first time you have one, or it feels like you're going crazy. And I agree, I hate that word, but that's how I felt in the moment. And so, from then on, because that was my second year in college, I waited that long to really go in a journey of, paying attention to my mental health and actively trying to work on it. And I wish it didn't take that long. I wish I didn't have to go through that. And so that's why in my work, I just try to work with youth and help them work on their mental health before they ever have to go through stuff like that. Because I waited way too long and I felt the effects of that. So, yeah.
You want to add? Howie?
I can go.
Yeah.
So, societal. Again, I have multiple identities, but specifically, I think I talked to earlier about being an immigrant. the hustle mentality, the survival, the scarcity mentality is not something that I also witnessed in my dad, but it's also something that I inherited because in my mind, I made it. This is the land of opportunity, so I had to seize that opportunity. It's not something that my family members could have, and I was one of the only few within the only family I have is my immediate family, and everybody else was back home. So I had to set that example. So I had to excel academically. I had to be the best, number one, and so that meant that, like, although I experienced loss, although I was, in these spaces, to Sabrina's point, it was repression, 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 because excellence was necessary, excellence was required, excellence was demanded. And then also being a Black woman on top of that, it's like there is no space to feel because you are the strong Black woman. And the myth of the strong Black woman is that you are the glue, you are the strength, you are the center of it, and you're supposed to hold everyone together. And so you can't have moments of weakness. You can't show weakness because that's not your myth, that's not who you are. So it's like these moments where I would feel uncertainty, where I would feel weakness, or I would feel self-doubt, it can't exist. So it was always invalidating my own feelings, definitely a lot of shoving that down to then pursue academic and I guess excellence in general. And then it really, and when you do that, it manifests in certain ways. So it's not necessarily verbal. It would be in physical, where similar to Sam, I would also have panic attacks. Or I think my first panic attack, I was like, I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, can you be like 16 and have a heart attack? Is this right? And it wasn't until I realized what these were that I was like, oh, mental health is real. And I need to validate my own feelings, and it's not something... it's something that I'm actively working on. I think dismantling that mentality that society feeds you takes a lot of work, and it's something that is slowly, like, as you break it down, it creeps back up on you. And so I really actively work on it and have to set myself reminders to be like, hey, positive self-talk. School, academics, excellence does not define you. You as a human being are worthy of it in itself, and your value isn't in comparison to others. It's you have value because you are you. And so that's the things that I'm currently working on and hope to work on.
I know, right? I was like, I want to applaud.
Yeah, come on.
Right.
We don't have to be too quiet here. Actually, y'all can join in on the conversation because I feel like we can all share too. Anyone else want to add and share on this question of societal impacts? Sitlali or Sabrina? Sitlali? Yeah, I see you shaking your head. Yeah.
For me and my family, if you even talked about like going to therapy, like you were automatically labeled, like you say, crazy. So like hearing my cousins be like, oh my God, you're crazy if you do that. I was like, I don't want to be crazy. It's like I never wanted to do therapy. And then like having all these like pressures on me, like being the first one in my family to graduate from college and like doing it on my own, not having the support from my parents except for like moral support from them, was really hard. And I also kind of just like only focused on school, didn't really do anything for my mental health. And like Howie and Sam shared, I also had like panic attacks because I was just like suppressing my feelings and only like having like that tunnel vision about school. And it wasn't until I had these panic attacks that I was like, okay, like I need to take a deep breath and like really like prioritize like my health, and like realizing that like my health is physical, emotional, spiritual. Like it's not just like, oh, is my blood pressure okay? Like, how am I feeling today, like regulating my emotions. And so slowly learning about like other therapies that I could do. Like it doesn't have to be, just going in and sitting and talking to someone about your feelings. Like I had gone to therapy when I was younger and it didn't really work out for me and it really stuck. But one therapist recommended my parents putting me into like a sport or like some sort of like extracurricular hobby. And when I started playing soccer, and that was like such a great outlet for me to like take out my stress, like any anger, and it was also very healthy. And so I think that helped a lot.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think that's a great segue. I'll just jump to the next question. We'll start with Sabrina, your answer for this, but like, right? Like there are different healing mechanisms, and especially for some of us where, the trauma stacks on, there are different things that we have to do. I mean, when I first did therapy, it didn't work for me. Actually, it was very, in my opinion, I think it made things worse because the person didn't really understand where it was coming from culturally. And also at that time, I was a victim of domestic violence, and I still kept feeling like, oh, it's my fault. Now, it's, not on top of that kind of therapy, I can do things like say no. Saying no actually helps a lot in my world. So Sabrina, talk to us about some other healing mechanisms.
Wonderful. I think that's a great question and something that I've really paid attention to more in the past few years, especially in my own practice. So I am a licensed master social worker, and I've worked with our unhoused folks, folks with mental disorders diagnosed, substance use challenges, folks in school, our young people in school and what they're dealing with, especially with going back to school after COVID. And something that I think is extremely important before we talk about healing mechanisms is recognizing that everything that people are experiencing is valid, right? And it looks different for different people. And that's why it's important to have different methods of therapeutic supports. So for me, one thing that I started doing in the past few months was gardening. I'm able to focus on the digging, the planting, the doing of actually being able to grow something instead of focusing on the hundreds of emails that I may have to answer the next day at work, or, a family conversation or something of that nature. It's a form of self-care, or what a lot of people call self-care. I say it's therapeutic supports, whatever that looks like for you. But as many folks on the panel in person have already said, it's not just about talking to someone in their office. There are so many other types of therapy, and part of that is finding someone or finding an organization that supports what that is for you, and being heard and being seen in that. So yes, I have a therapist, and I believe, preventative care and overall well-being is important. And, something that she reminds me to do is take time for you. What does that look like to make you feel full? You can't fill other people if you don't feel full, if you're not dealing with your own challenges. So taking a walk, getting active, as, someone on the panel said, being involved in those sports and extracurricular activities, getting fresh air, not secluding yourself. That's what I did, in my 20s. I would be in my home or, wherever I was. I wouldn't talk to folks when I was feeling bad. I wouldn't go out and enjoy those activities that I used to enjoy, the arts, dancing, engaging in some type of class, right? That gets you out of that funk and around other people, even if you're not talking to them. All those things are important. All of those things can be therapeutic. And I would always suggest to people to find a mix, right, that works for you. You can talk to a therapist and you can pray to a higher power if that's what you want to do. You can play sports. You can go to museums. You can journal. That's something that I'm not great at. I'm not consistent at whatsoever. But also I do yoga. And I use that time to, again, focus my breath, focus my mind, and get back to the center and the spirit of who I am. And that's what keeps me going. And I'm able to get to the next point, especially when I'm not able to possibly have consistent meetings with my therapist.
Thanks, Sabrina. Oh, by the way, you have question cards on your seats for those who are here in person. So if you've got questions for our speakers, go ahead and write them down. And we have Lauren here who's going to pass them on through, so we'll get answers for you in just a little bit. Anyone want to add on healing mechanisms? Want to share? Howie?
Share a little. I think to Sabrina's point, I went through a period where I was like heavily depressed, and it wasn't until COVID I realized like COVID meant everything was shut down, and so I didn't work, I didn't have school, I was left with me, and that's like what is Howie? Who is Howie? What does she like?
That's intense. Right?
Yeah, that is intense. It's a lot of time to then figure out. And so it was a lot of time to pick new hobbies. And I realized I really like plants. So if you've ever been in a Zoom call with me, there's just like so many plants in my room. It got to the point where my room was too filled that I like started sleeping into my family's room. And now they're proud plant owners as well. But plant care, I think being able to take care of something other than my own and really have that type of like therapeutic time where I'm watering and caring and making sure like once that grows, it's kind of like the manifestation of growth, and it's like a physical manifestation of what emotional growth looks like onto that plant. And so that's how I also kind of do that, as well as like just being in nature. Walks, like physical exercise is so helpful and really necessary. Yeah, that's how I do. Anyone else?
I'll go. For me, healing mechanisms, joining Poder, the organization, people organizing to demand economic and environmental rights. When I was a teen, really helped me, like being a part of something bigger, like gave me purpose again. And I started doing like organizing work when I was like sophomore, junior in high school. And then eventually I graduated and I went into working at Hummingbird Farm, which is like another part of Poder. They help manage that farm. And getting connected to the land, like how Howie was talking about, like just learning that you are like one with everything. And I think for me, especially like growing up in the city, it's like very fast paced. Everything is like now, like I'm used to like the internet, like getting results now. And I'd be like, when the Safari's buffering, I get so irritated and I need to like remind myself to take a breath. And like working at the farm has definitely helped me a lot, because I've learned to like care for plants and like learn about the seasons and how like things die but they come back, and how like, you know, just like focusing on one plant, like talking to the plant, like, you know, like singing to it too, watering it. And I know it sounds crazy, but like learning from the plant, I've learned like, you know, a plant itself doesn't worry about what the other plant, if that one's getting more sun, if that one's getting more water. Like it's just focused on itself, you know? And so like applying that to myself and being like, okay, if I'm a plant, like I need to water myself, I need to get my sunlight, you know, and like working together. Like I learned about the mycelium network, like how everything is connected, everyone's connected, and like if I'm doing good, then I'm able to bring good to other people.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's something about what each of you had shared, you know, this like connection between nature and us and as like humans, and learning from all of you what you've shared, your willingness to help others has been part of your healing mechanism, and your willingness to share what's worked for you. I mean, that's huge, right? Like, because I think you share as you want it to be a better place for everybody else, even if they're strangers. Let's talk about that part. Oh, David, you wanted to share?
Can I just tag an observation that I made too?
Yeah, sure.
If I could, I'm not going to call anybody out for something. There's something that I was thinking about. Like, if someone just looked at you and me, they're gonna be like, okay, these two people look pretty different, right? Like, there's appearance of different race and gender, expression, age, and like a whole of different things. But what I heard you talk about a few minutes ago, I call it, but I'm the good kid syndrome. And I have it too, and I grew up with it too. And I was like, there's this thing about something inside of you, or something that I believe, or I have heard is inside of you, or has been inside of you, which is also inside of me, is that like, I defended against everything that I thought was going on by like being the good kid. It's like, no, but I'm gonna study harder and I'm gonna achieve academically. And then actually what that turned into a little bit later in life when I had a job was, anytime I had to have an evaluation like conversation with my boss, it turned into like all the fear of like like, you know, is this person am I gonna feel shame because I'm not good enough somehow? When someone might be just like, hey, when I ask you for something on Friday, I want you to hustle and actually turn it in on Friday. It has nothing to do with who I am or whether I'm good or whether I'm good at my job even. It's just like, I just need to give you some feedback, but I'm a good kid, like stuff gets triggered and it just like has that kind of shame response. But anyway,
yeah,
just kind of wanted to.
No, thank you for adding that and reminding it. Yeah, right. No, totally.
And I also sorry, I have to do another one too, but I don't want to take up too more space. But also something that Sabrina and that you all was talking about, plans and hope. Sabrina was talking about it too, and it was that like hope is not an emotion. It's a it's a system of, it's like a belief. It's like, I have a plan, there's something I'm looking forward to, and I believe that I can get there. And that's probably been like some of my best mechanism for like getting through the wreck that was 2020 and much of 2021, is like a belief that there's going to be something on the other side. I want to make a nearish term plan for myself and the things I want to achieve, and like having something to like wake up for in the morning to work on has been huge for me. Because if you're still in survival, and so many of us get through that survival mode, it's like, bro, I'm just trying to get through the day or to my next class. And you can't just live like that, right? That's not as much as like, I got to have a next thing, and I believe I can get there. And that's where hope comes from, I think. And I feel like I heard a little of each of you say something kind of like that. It doesn't weren't your words, but I felt the theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. For where I was going with it was basically wanting all of you to just share, you know, that work that you're doing. That it's not necessarily only about yourself, even though you're prioritizing your own selves, but you really are also doing peer-to-peer things. I mentioned, you know, Sam, you mentioned a little bit about being there for other youths. It's like, let's share that. I mean, let's share that work and your why you think it's so important to also show up for one another.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, for me, I mean, we do a lot at Youth Alliance, honestly. I think some of the work we do that actually ties into the healing mechanisms is we do art, like professional paint nights. We pair up with a local artist, and he gives them classes kind of on just how to paint certain things. So that's pretty cool, especially. We do it every once in a while, but sometimes, you know, it comes around times of the holidays, so we could do something related to like what time of year it is. We've also paired up with an amazing nonprofit called Saved by Nature. And so what they do is they try to make the outdoors more accessible to people. So with them, we've been able to take our youth on hiking and camping trips and stuff like that. And that's beautiful because nature is healing. And yeah, a lot of other work too. We do a ton of stuff around fentanyl awareness, and like, honestly, yeah, we do a lot, really. I mean, as an organization, we do tutoring services. As a person, you know, just trying to work on myself and work with the youth and everything, really just incorporating healing justice. I think that's something really I've been able to incorporate in both my personal life and in my work life. You know, I recently saw a definition that I really liked, and just paraphrasing because it was kind of long, but it was like reviving ancestral practices to address generational trauma. And I just think that's beautiful because we always talk about the generational trauma that gets passed down, but we don't talk about all the wisdom that's been passed down from generations. And so I think the fact that not only are we acknowledging that wisdom, but we're using it to combat the generational traumas that have been passed down, I think that's beautiful. And so that's honestly just a little bit. I mean, I could go on forever, but yeah, thank you for asking.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. Sabrina, I feel like there's something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I would love to. And I think, thank you so much, Sam, for talking about the work that you're doing. That has been a thread in my career and personal life. It's really amplifying the voices of others in this fight for equitable access to resources and initiatives, especially for young people and young adults, because even in 2022, people are still having the same experiences I had back in 2004, 2005, and their voices are being shut down. And especially young people. I always say that young people are the now, they're not the future, right? We always say, you know, the youth are the future. No, they're the now. So it's very important, especially with the work I'm doing with DoSomething.org, to provide avenues for young people to have their voices amplified and for us to support them. The underpinning of what we're doing, aligned with our new strategic plan, creating youth focus and youth voice programs, you know, speaking to young people and saying, you know, what is going on with you? How is this affecting your life? And how can we support you in being change makers for this? And a lot of what the young people said when we, spoke with them and we did our assessment was, we need resources. We need a seat at the table for that, though, right? Like it shouldn't be performative. Don't call on us to talk about our mental health if you're not actually providing a seat at the table where we can amplify our voice and stand shoulder to shoulder with you to make change. So that's what I think is most important about the work that I'm doing now and the work of Do Something is we're providing avenues for young people to actually be change makers, especially in the space of mental health. It's not enough to have a conversation. We have to advocate for change and advocate for equitable access to the initiatives and the funding and other areas of well-being for young people to really thrive. And if you change the trajectory of a child, we change the trajectory of the community. So if our young people can thrive, then, by being adjacent to that, hopefully our communities can thrive and grow into this place where, in 2030, right? It seems like it's really far off, but it's not. We're no longer just having the conversation. Legislators are listening to us. There are bills passed. There are more services in schools and in the community to support the mental health needs of everyone.
Hallie?
Can you ask the question one more time?
Oh, yeah. It's just, showing up for one another. I mean, your why. That the work isn't really just about you.
Yeah. I got my organizing start with Californians for Justice, which is based in South Bay, specifically San Jose area. I think it was then when I learned about advocacy, but I think what made me stay there was like their work with what healing looks like and different outlets for healing. So there's activism and artivism, and all these are a means of healing and providing that to someone else. But I think when I joined YoCali, who is a state organizing body, and they don't do direct services to, unlike Sam's org. They kind of do trainings, and really I think the focus of being one of our main core values is healing justice. And so doing everything through the lens of healing justice. How do we make sure that those that are providing these, as to your point, healing others and helping others are also not pouring from an empty cup? You can't pour from an empty cup. And so really providing that service. And then also to Sabrina's point on the topic of funding, like youth know what we need, but most often than not, we are not asked what we are needed. We are given. It does not work. You cannot solve problems without our input because we know what we want. We also know what we experience, and we have, knowledge because it's our lived experiences, and we have narratives to share. And so these, when we're making decisions about funding, it can't be from a position of power and then expecting it to trickle down to everybody else. And also making sure that these are equitable, where people of color, systems impacted, part of the LGBTQ plus community are at that table is also something that should be necessary. And so these are how I see things and how my organizing really shines through when it comes to healing justice.
Fire. Silali?
Yes. Something that Hummingbird Farm did this year that was actually super amazing, hella dope, was we grew a lot of chamomile at our farm. And so we harvested a lot of it for a good, I didn't want to say 6 months. I'm not sure, but it was a long time, and it was a lot of chamomile. And we also got rosemary and lavender, and we made little chamomile tea bags, lavender roll-ons, and then rosemary spritz. And we harvested, packaged, and distributed them for all-in backpack giveaway. And this is backpack giveaway that happens every year in San Francisco. And so we created about 800 or 900 plant medicine to give out to the youth. And it was super cool because we were able to create a little zine and let the youth know that, if you're feeling stressed or if you need, your stomach is feeling uneasy, you can drink some chamomile tea. If you're feeling stressed and you want some aromatherapy, you use the lavender roll-ons. And then the rosemary spritz was if you're studying, you spray it around because rosemary, when you smell it, it rushes blood to your brain, so it's really good for memory. So we explained all of this, and it was super cool to see all the little it was like from kindergarten all the way to like 8th grade, high school, seeing all those like youth like leave with their backpacks, and like they had other resources too, like they were giving out like free haircuts and everything. But to see them leave with like plant medicine and knowing that they could rely on that plant medicine for them to like, you know, get through things, and also like letting them know that there's like a space at Hummingbird Farm for them to come in, and it's really like for the community. There's no gates, it's not locked, there's no fences, no barriers, nothing. Like, you can come in at any time. And so just like letting the youth know that that space is there for them is really dope.
Nice.
Can I add one
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Howie.
It's just more like a uplifting Sam Ali, because the work they do is that they're providing these cares that ultimately they're substance impacted, Black and brown, people that wouldn't get these types of cares, that aren't, you know, where therapy is scarce or can't afford it or don't have access to it because of insured low income folks. And so they're able to provide these alternative cares to healing. And so I really, really just want to uplift the work that they do, because they do some amazing work and they're just so passionate about the cause.
Right? Let's give a round of applause for all of our youth activists. Yeah. I'm not going to cry. But I am so, like, just honored and proud and so grateful and thankful that y'all are doing the work that you're doing. I'm gonna go to questions, because we only have a few minutes left. And for those who are here in person, we do have a reception, and we have a special artist who's here with us this evening, who's going to be doing some pieces for us. So the first question, I think this one is for Howie, actually. So it's up to you if you want to answer it. And by the way, for those who wrote your questions, thank you. But we give an opportunity for our speakers to pass if they want to. So the question is, did the myth of the strong Black woman exist in Ethiopia? Did you learn that myth in the USA?
I mean, I think it would be more in the USA, because I came to this country when I was 7. So it's only developed through like my existence here, I think. But it's just the idea that the Black woman has to be strong. There's no space for weakness. And then if you have a moment where you break or you snap, you can't snap, because then you validate the myth of the angry Black woman. And so you had to walk this very straight and narrow line of like, just, you have to have everything together. And so I think it's definitely something that as I grew up in America and I learned, I was socialized. It's American thing.
Yeah. Sabrina's shaking her head. Sabrina, did you want to add something to the question?
Definitely what was already said is so important. And I think it's interesting, because I have friends and colleagues who are from the diaspora, so, you know, Black, but they're Caribbean, African heritage, whatever that looks like. And in our conversations, we are all experiencing the same thing. And we're not quite sure where it came from, but it was modeled in our homes. And I had a conversation with my mother a few months ago, and it was modeled, you know, by her mom, and it was modeled by my great grandmother. And it's just this cycle that's continued, I think, generationally, at least for Black Americans, that started during slavery, where we did not have the opportunity or the luxury to fall apart. You had to keep it together. And then we go into, you know, the 80s and the crack epidemic, right? And Black mothers, because fathers were being taken out of the home, and a lot of other systemic issues going on, you had to be strong. You couldn't break down. You couldn't say that you needed help, because who was there to help? So I think it's important that we continue to talk about it. Some people think that it's gone away because we're talking more about our mental health. We're talking more about our needs. We're asking for help, but it's still there. I see it often, even, you know, in my professional life, unfortunately.
One last question from our audience before we move to the last question. I think this one's for you, David. How does one validate their own feelings? How can one be kind to ourselves, and then, as we know, how to be kind to ourselves, kind to others?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer. I've been a therapist for 25 years. I don't got that one. because it's a daily practice, you know, and it's like I think there's no core secret that's going to work for everybody, but I think what's helpful for very many people is to go meta sometimes. I mean, Sam, one of the first things you said, you were talking about like you lost it, you're like you got mad, and then you were like, oh, that wasn't me, and it's like when you have something and you're like, oh, that thing that I just did was totally unlike me. That clearly wasn't me. Who was that? Oh, it was the guy who had a really hard week at work this time, and you know, it was like, oh, it was the person who had this happen to them, and of course that's a natural human response, right? So it's like every once in a while when stuff is really, really rough, if just for a minute you can pretend that you're a third person watching the situation, and like, what would you tell that person? Like if you were that person's best friend who cared and loved that person and wanted the best for that person and could maybe see what was going on, what would you tell that person, and what kind of hope would you try to give that person? And that third person characteristic is really like the best parts of yourself. That's what your voice is. It's like a projection, but it's like, what do I need to hear? Because it's in there. What I need to hear, I already know, and it's in there somewhere, but I cannot access it when I'm in the situation. But if I can pretend that there's this wonderful, beautiful person who just cares and loves me, what would they say? And that's the validation that you need to hear. And sometimes having it from another human being really is helpful. That like I haven't been through the thing that you've been through, but I've had a feeling that's like yours, and man, that really sucked. And just that I'm not alone, and it's that validation of someone witnessing my humanity and experience. But when you're by yourself and it's 2 a.m, and you don't have that access, I think if you've got the strength in the moment to go meta and look at yourself from a different perspective, then that's where some of that validation can come from.
Go meta. It's my new hashtag.
That was not like I didn't mean to make a corporate or something like. That's not where I was going. And also, the first thing I said about religion, I did not mean to bash anybody's religion or spirituality. I was just talking about a me thing. But anyway, that was right. I wanted to.
Yeah. I actually forgot about Meta, the company.
I'm in San Francisco.
Listening to you. Okay, last question for all of us. I mean, you know, part of the discussion is about equity. So we obviously know that, you know, we need to build more equitable opportunities and pathways, especially for our youths and our mental health. So I'd love for each of you to take, maybe 30 seconds or so, but tell us, you know, kind of your final thoughts on how we can create the equitable pathway for youths and mental health. I'm going to start with Howie, because I feel like you're like, I got this one.
I don't know if I got this one, but I think Silali and Sam beautifully demonstrate that they know what's going on in the ground, that they're doing this work to provide healing and doing it in an equitable way and providing that equity. And so when we have these, you know, pools of money together that are like, oh, we want to fund mental health for youth, how should we go about it? I think it's bringing and elevating people like Sam and Zalali who do these type of works and really having their input in how this money is distributed, and really then centering grassroots organizations that are doing this work because they do it in an equitable means. And so that's how I personally see the equitable nature of this.
Sam?
Yeah. Well, 30 seconds is pretty tough to cover all that.
If you find a minute.
I would say, you know, I think in order to create equitable systems around mental health, I think we need to think about, equity, right? And so how I said, in my job, I work on fentanyl, right, and fentanyl awareness. I think we can look at how the stigmatization and criminalization of drugs and substance abuse as a way of a lot of people not having their needs met, right? They have to lean on that as a last resort to cope, as a way of survival. The way we've criminalized that, especially for Black and brown communities, I think we need to look at that in addition to a lot of other issues. That's simply one example of how mental health and like activism are intertwined, right? Because it's a cause and effect, these social issues of mental health. If we address mental health better, then it wouldn't cause the need for people to feel like they have to cope with substances. But at the same time, it's an effect because when we lock people up for their survival mechanisms, then their whole community feels that the absence of them, a part of them is locked up with those people. And so it's really led to us hating our own loved ones simply because their needs aren't met. And so instead of asking what's wrong with these people, I think we just need to start asking what's wrong with the systems in place to where these people felt like they needed to depend on issues such as substances.
Absolutely. Silali.
Something that I think about is like how you brought up prevention, Sam. I think like I read a post saying like how like having housing is like suicide prevention, getting warm meals is suicide prevention, like getting education is suicide prevention. And like something that I see a lot, especially with like the pandemic, has been like giving youth jobs, like having them get paid, having them feel like they belong to something, like there's like they have this like sense of purpose. I'm gonna share like my niece during the pandemic, she got really depressed. Like me and her would talk a lot, like we would share like we were feeling really down. And recently she just started working and I went to go visit her at work. And it was really funny because I got there and I was like, oh, like, how do you like your work? She was like, oh my God, I love it. She was like, I love it. She's like, I feel like I'm doing something. I'm getting paid. Like, she's like a different person. She's a lot more motivated in school. She's doing a lot better in school. And it's like seeing young people get paid and being like passionate about the work they do, like having meaning in their life. I feel like that's like a big part. Like people don't realize, like giving them like autonomy for themselves, like having their own little like money, being able to like spend it on what they want, and like just giving them a sense of purpose is a big part.
Yep. Sabrina.
Thank you so much. I think the first step is listening to the communities that we're working in, listening to the people that we're saying we're trying to help. A lot of times we go in with solutions in mind and we're not actually listening to the folks who are most impacted. Some communities are struggling with blight, right? Community blight, lack of access to green spaces. And they're telling us this is what's wrong with our community and it's affecting our mental health, not necessarily using those words. So if we start addressing the issues that people are saying are the most challenging for them, then we can build up to greater solutions and in terms of how we impact mental health or indirectly or directly impact mental health and overall well-being. The second thing is recognizing that there's not a one size fits all. Everyone is their own person and their own individual, and it can look different. The symptoms of depression and anxiety and anything else that's going on looks different from person to person. And I think we need to throw out, as someone who is a psych major and a social worker, I have my DSM, diagnostic and statistical manual sitting next to my desk all the time. And sometimes I just want to throw it against a wall because it's like, this is not what it looks like. And this person is still struggling with this challenge, right? Or this diagnosis. And then the third and last thing that I think is extremely important is removing labels. Every time there's some type of violent act, a lot of times the media labels someone as having a mental health challenge, right? That's when we hear about mental health in the media because someone was violent, some act happened, and that's not true, right? Like, folks who struggle with mental health, they're actually the most vulnerable populations. So removing those labels, stop calling everything, a mental health diagnosis, removing that stigma is a way forward to truly address the well-being of people in this country, especially young people who are experiencing symptoms at so much higher rates, especially after COVID.
Anything to add, David?
I would say when we have the opportunity to choose to be helpful, do it. And at a minimum, don't make the choice that is harmful. I think I 100%, when I was thinking about what am I going to say, you said it before I had a chance to, Sabrina, but it was like, white people need to listen to people who aren't white and believe what they say. Cisgender people, straight people, anybody who's in a moment of privilege. Maybe it's not permanent privilege. Like I experience oppression and privilege, right? But like when you're in a moment of privilege, listen to other people, believe. And it's not it's like I have learned from others. It's not that like treat people how you want to be treated. It's treat people how they tell you that they want to be treated, and that the thing that helps some people doesn't help everyone. So you got to tailor make the way that people ask for help and want help, and how you can listen to them and respond.
Let's give a round of applause for all of our speakers. Thank you so much, David, Howie, Sam, Zitlali, and Sabrina. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you to Blue Shield of California and Blue Sky for supporting this opportunity to come together and offer our vulnerabilities as well as our strengths. And a lot of these things that we talked about, these are solutions for our future. This is our future. Thank you to all of you for joining us here at the Commonwealth Club of California, and thank you to all of you who joined us online. The Commonwealth Club of California produces over 500 programs every year, and so if you're interested in learning more, you can head to commonwealthclub.org